Okay, so in your email, I wasn't sure which multiplication problem you were actually referencing. So the most common multiplication question I get from the homework is number 4. So that's what this is that I have drawn on here for you. So I'm just going to walk you through this one. Since it's the largest one, I thought maybe that was the one you're referencing. Here on number 4, so what happens in multiplication? Remember what's going to happen. You start, of the two numbers you have on the screen here, 10.93 and 1.55, we're going to start with that bottom number, the 1.55, but you start with the very far right-hand digit, and what's going to happen is I'm going to multiply that by each digit of the top number, the 3, then the 9, then the 0, then the 1. Then that answer is going to go right here. Then what's going to happen is I'm going to do the exact same thing to the 5, by the 3, by the 9, by the 1, or the 0, and then the 1. And then that answer is going to go underneath it. I'm going to do the same thing with then finally the 1. I'm going to multiply that by the 3, the 9, the 0, and then the 1. And that answer is going to go right here. Then at the end, all of these answers that we had are going to get added together. So let me get this off the screen here, so that's kind of confusing. And I am going to walk you through just that. So in 10.93, again, times 1.55, ignore those decimals for right now, as those decimals won't come in until the very end. So, starting with the 5. So that's this number right here. I'm going to multiply that by each number at the top, starting with 5 times 3. 5 times 3 is 15, so I put the 5 down, and I'm going to carry the 1. What happens is that 1 is going to get added to our next multiplication problem. So I multiply now 9 times 5. 9 times 5 is 45, but plus 1 is 46. So I put my 6 down and carry the 4, and I'm going to follow that same process. Now 5 times 0 is my next multiplication there. 5 times 0 is 0, but plus 4 is 4. And then there's nothing to carry on that, so I don't carry it. And then I just multiply, then finally the last problem there is 5 times 1, which is then just 5. So that should be my answer for everything there. And again, that was taking that 5 and multiplying it by that top number from the far right, moving to the left. And we're going to do the same thing now with the next 5. So I'm going to circle that, and I'm going to just cross out what we've carried over there. So we have new carried numbers. And I'm going to multiply that one out. But first, anytime you move on to another digit, you have to start that answer line with a 0. The next answer line will actually have 2 zeros in it because you add more zeros with each number that you move on to. So now multiplying this one out, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Because it is the same number, I'm actually going to have the same number answers as well. Again, starting with 5 times 3. 5 times 3 is 15, so I put my 5 down and carry my 1 again. So we're going to see the same pattern here. 5 times 9 is 45, but plus 1 is 46. Carry my 4 again. 5 times 0 is 0, but plus 4 is 4. And then lastly, 5 times 1 is 5. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the 1. Okay, so the 1 right there. Now, because it's the second digit that I've moved on to, I am going to add 2 zeros to this and go ahead and multiply that 1 out. So now, multiplying the 1, again, I'm going to cross that out. There's actually no values that I'm going to carry here. I'm going to multiply the 1 by the 3, then the 9, then the 0, then the 1 as well. So 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 9 is 9. 1 times 0 is 0. And then lastly, 1 times 1 is 1. So again, I don't have any more numbers to multiply, so I don't have anything else to continue forward with. So these are all my answers down here. I just go ahead and add these values together, and then that's going to produce our answer. So starting on the very far right, over here, so down here, 5 plus 0 is 5. 6 plus 5 plus 0 is 11, so I'm going to carry my 1 up here. 1 plus 4 plus 6 plus 3 is 14. Carry my 1. 1 plus 5 plus 4 plus 9 is 19, so I carry my 1. 1 plus 5 plus 0 is 6, and then 1 plus nothing else is 1. So, this is going to be our answer. However, since our original problem had some decimals in it, my answer will also have a decimal in it. what we do is we go back up to our original problem, and the number of digits that we have after each decimal point up here in our problem is how many numbers we'll have after the decimal point in our problem. So what I mean by that is in that first number, 10.93, there were 2 numbers after the decimal. In 1.55, there were also 2 numbers after the decimal. That gives us a total of 4 decimal places. Therefore, our answer will also have 4 decimal places. So all we do is we count in from the end. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that means the decimal is going to go just in front of that number, making this answer 16.9415. And again, don't forget, use your calculator to double check that answer, as you will find that will make that tremendously easier. When you check that, even if you type in the problem, even before you work out the problem, type in 10.93 times 1.55, take a look at what the answer should be, and then that way as you go through the rest of your problem, you know what you're aiming for, if that helps. But that definitely will help to check your work at the end. Okay, so moving on, there were some questions about the division as well, so I'm going to go ahead and get this out of the way. You asked me to walk through those 3 division problems on your homework, so numbers 2, 3, and 4. Number 2 was the one I walked through on the video that I sent to the entire class. So hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that video, but I will go ahead and add that on here. This was 43.27, that's a decimal, sorry, divided by 2.5. So here, in both numbers 2 and 4, both of those started out where this outside number was where we were dividing by a decimal. So in that 2.5 being a decimal there on the outside, we never want that. We always want that number to be a whole number. So what I want to do is I want to turn that into 25. I need to get rid of that decimal that's in between there. So what we do is we simply just take that decimal point and move it as many times as we can to get it to the very end. And in this case, that turns it into 25. In order for us to be able to do that, we have to also move the decimal that's inside that bracket the same number of places. So since I moved that decimal once on the outside, I'm also going to move my decimal once on the inside. And that will then turn this now into 432.7 divided by 25. So let me go ahead and actually just rewrite that as my new equation. 432.7 divided by 25. This is going to make it a lot easier, as it's easier to think about our multiples of 25 rather than our multiples of 2.5. So in doing so, thinking about that, so if you need to, use your calculator to help you along the way. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So I know what we have to do is we have to start by asking ourselves, how many times will 25 go into 4? Well, 25 is obviously bigger than 4, so that won't work. So we move on to 43. We know 25 will at least go into 43 at least once. So remember the idea when we're asking ourselves this question, how many times will that outside number go into something? I want to know how many times it can go in without going over. Like for instance, I know that 25 will only go into 43 one time because 1 times 25 is 25. It won't go in 2 times because 2 times 25 is 50. And 50 is bigger than this number, so that won't work. So we say that 25 will go into 43 one time. We write our answer right here at the top. We said that again because 1 times 25 is 25. What I do is I write my answer just right underneath that number we were just referring to so that I can subtract and see what's left over. When I take that 43 minus 25, it'll give me my remainder, which is 18. So I write that just underneath here. So that's my remainder. So then what our next step is to then bring down the next digit, so starting here with the 2, making this now 182. Now I'm simply just going to ask myself the exact same question that I did as the 25 into the 43. Now I want to know how many times will 25 go into this number. So 25, if it helps, again, use your calculator. If you take 182 divided by 25, that gives you 7.28. That means it goes in 7 whole times. So I write 7 at the top, and I say that again because what I do is I take 7 times 25, so 7 times 25, and write that answer underneath my 182, just as we did before. 7 times 25 is 175, so I'm going to write that answer right underneath is 175. And again, I'm going to subtract that to get my remainder. So 182 minus 175 is 7. Oh, let me use the same color. It's 7. So that's my remainder. My next step is to go ahead and bring down my next value, making this now 77. So now I want to ask myself the same question. Now how many times will 25 go into 77 here? So 25 will go into 77 3 times because 3 times 25 is 75. So when I write that underneath, I subtract, and that gives me a remainder of 2. So now I no longer have any more numbers to bring down, but I need something to keep going. I never want to stop at a remainder of 2. I always want to keep going until I get a remainder of 0. So what I do is I can add another 0 to my original number, and that will allow me to continue moving forward in this question. I can now bring down that next value and continue going. What I'll do here is now ask myself the same question. How many times now will 25 go into 20? 25 will go into 20 0 times. Since 25 is bigger than 20, that won't work. So that's our answer. It'll go in 0 times. Because 0 times 25 is 0, when I subtract, that gives me a remainder of 20. So once again, my remainder is something other than 0, and I want to keep going until I get a remainder of 0. So what we're going to have to do is add another 0 to our original number. Go ahead and bring that number down. Sorry, it's getting so cramped in here in this particular problem. But when I bring that 0 down, that makes this now 200, and I ask myself the same question. How many times will 25 go into 200? And 25 goes into 200 8 times. Since 8 times 25 is 200, there's my remainder of 0. So that means I can stop now. The only thing that's going to happen is where my decimal is in my problem, that's where my decimal is going to be in my answer. So my answer should be 17.308. Okay, now looking at the second problem of division, you were asking me to take a look at number 3. Let me get all this out of your way, and I won't make number 3 as messy. Number 3 and 4, I won't make that as messy as I did on that one. I was trying to draw arrows to show what needed to be divided. And again, that number 2 that I just walked through is also on the other video that I sent to the entire class. So hopefully that one you'll be able to see twice. But on number 3, we are looking at, let's see, 9,374 divided by 8. So this one hopefully is a little bit easier because we are dividing by a single-digit whole number. But we do the same thing. We start with how many times 8 will go into 9, and then we'll slowly work with each individual number. So asking ourselves first, how many times will 8 go into 9? 8 goes into 9 only one time because 8 times 1 is 8, so we write that underneath to subtract and get our remainder of 1. Next step is to do the same thing we did before. We're going to, one at a time, bring down each individual value, the next very one, so that's going to make that now 13. Now we ask ourselves the exact same question. How many times now will 8 go into 13? 8 will go into 13 again only one time. Again, because 2 times 8 is 16, so that will mean that that would have gone over 13. And we need it to just be as close to 13 as possible without going over. So that's why we just chose 1. We said that again because 1 times 8 is 8, so I subtract, and that gives me a remainder of 5. So next step is to just go ahead and bring down our next value just as we did before, making that now 57. 8 will go into 57 7 times. I'm changing my marker here. 7 times, because 7 times 8 is 56. So when I subtract, that gives me a remainder of 1. Next step again is to bring down my last value there, making that now 14. And 8 will only go into 14 once again only one time, because 1 times 8 is 8. So I write that underneath, and I subtract, and that gives me a remainder of 6. So here on this one, I had mentioned to you guys on this, we can actually stop at this point. We did look at division of whole numbers, and with division of whole numbers, we could just stop at that remainder. But if you wanted to keep going, if you wanted to see what would happen here if we did keep going, what you would have to do is add a decimal to that original number. So adding a decimal now allows me to now add a 0, and that's the same number. 9,374 is the same thing as 9,374.0. What that does is that allows me to bring another number down, and I can continue going with this problem now. 8 will go into now 60 7 times, because 7 times 8, again, still is 56. I'm sorry, trying to draw that really small here. Giving me a remainder of 4. If I still want to keep going again with this decimal, I'm going to have to add another 0 to that original number, bring that down, making this now 40, and 8 will go into 40 5 times, because 5 times 8 is 40, and that does give me my remainder of 0 there. And then once again, we need to bring our decimal up to our original point. So that one, the answer is either 1,171 remainder 6. So if we wanted to stop at that remainder point, that would have been fine. Or we could have kept going and making that 1,171.75. So either answer is acceptable on that one. And then lastly, we're looking at number 4. Number 4 says this, and I'll try to make this a little bit smaller so we can have more room. 90.364, and we were dividing that by 8.2. So this one was kind of tough, because 8.2, again with a decimal, 8.2, we want to turn that into 82 first, and 82 dividing by 82 is a little tough. And again, I mentioned to you guys in class, we can use our calculator along the way to help if we need to, and I can show you how to do that. Once again, we have to first move our decimal as many times as it takes to get that to the end, so that we can use 82 in this case instead of 8.2. It's going to be much easier to see multiples of 82 than it is 8.2. And then again, if we do that on the outside, we have to do the same thing on the inside in order to keep that answer equal. And that will now make this 903.64 divided by 82. And this one's going to be much, much easier to work with then. Let me see if I can get an eraser here and erase that top one. So now this is what we're working with, and this is going to be much easier to work with here. Okay, so taking this one at a time, we start with 80 into 9. Obviously 82. 82 will not go into just 9, so we had to move on to 90, as we did in the very first problem. 82 times 2 is obviously going to be bigger than 90, so 82 will only go into 90 one time. And again, that is because 1 times 82 is 82, and when I subtract, that's going to give me a remainder of 8. My next step, as we've been doing, we bring down the next value after we get that remainder. Our next value is 3, so bringing that down, that makes it 83. So I do the same thing. How many times will 82 go into 83? 82 will go into 83 only one time, because 1 times 82 is 82, and when I subtract, that gives me a remainder of 1. Next step again is to just bring down my next value, making that now 16. 82 is obviously much bigger than 16, so 82 will go into 16 0 times. Since 0 times 82 is 0, that produces a remainder of 16. Now that allows me to bring down my next value, and that makes this now 164. If you did 164 divided by 82 in your calculator, you're going to get an even 2, which means it goes in exactly 2 times. Since 2 times 82 is 164, I get a remainder of 0. So since I no longer have any more numbers to bring down, and I've reached that remainder of 0, I have reached my stopping point. I just need to bring my decimal up into my answer, and my answer is 11.2. So I hope that helps with those specific problems, and it helps you at least with to see the process with the multiplication and division. If you have any further questions, let me know.